Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Spyderco Knives Pochi. First off though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank Spyderco very much for sending this guy along. That's right, they reached out to me, said, hey Nick, here's the latest catalog, you interested in anything? I said, sure, I'll check out the Pochi, among other things, just because it's one of those things that's crazy, but who knows, they've made crazy work before. I told them, as always, I'm talking about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly, might be a gem, might be junk, they still did send it along. We do have to assume, though, that this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever, although we'll talk about that later on, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature and quality of my review. But there you go, full disclosure. Next thing, size comparison. This thing is pretty small. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2, which makes the PM2 look gigantic. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica, which again, Delica's looking pretty big over here. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. Yeah, this is a small knife, and then actually two more size comparisons of relevance, both within Spyderco. One is the Spyderco Dragonfly, and so what we see here is that this guy, the blade length on this guy, as well as the handle size, this is much smaller than the Dragonfly. And then here we go. The closest size comparison I've actually got is this guy right here. This is the Spyderco Man Bug. What we see here is that the handle is about the same size, but the knife is a little bit bigger when folded, and we get a little tiny bit more in the way of sharpened blade length on the Man Bug here. So this is a small knife, even by my standards. Next thing, this guy is a weird design. In case you haven't figured this out already, this is a very strange knife. It is based on a design by Kazuyuki Sakurai. Sorry, my Japanese is not particularly a thing. But this is sort of the maker's specialty, this particular thing. And so this is sort of a production custom from somebody who is apparently a reasonably popular maker over in Japan, doing this kind of thing. Then finally, the price is $190. Just introducing that elephant in the room right now. So let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife here. Good side. Start with, it's got a big ol' over travel stop on it, right? You aren't traveling. What I mean by that is that if you push the lock bar here, and you push it harder than you should, it's just going to run up against this big washer on the back here. Well, washer, I mean, it's domed, right? It's kind of a weird washer. But either way, it runs up against this structure on the back here. This means that there is no way to overbend the lock bar, which, you know, is a nice thing. In effect, the look of it ends up looking like a dog with Captain America's shield strapped to the side of it, but hey, why not, right? So there you go. Next thing, this has a reasonable blade for the size, right? This has a very thin hollow grind. I mean, this comes down to a very, very thin edge here. It cuts like crazy, and it's also quite sharp out of the box. And it is the steel on this is CPM S45 VN, not S35 VN, which we are all pretty well used to. This is S45 VN. Now, do I have strong opinions about this steel? No, not yet. I've used it a little bit on this guy, and it seems fine. But S45 is sort of the new hotness, so to speak, and so it's interesting to see that I believe this is actually the first knife that Spyderco has used S45 on. And so that's kind of interesting here. We'll zoom in a little bit on the guy. So there you go. Next thing, we've got the tail right here. See, the tail goes back and forth, wagging only on the Y dimension, or actually, I don't know what dimension this would be. Z? Well, it's a rotation about... anyways, it's a rotation about a fixed point. Anyways, we're not going into radians here. So the tail is kind of interesting. And the tail, actually, a lot of people are going to ask, you know, Nick, why does the knife have a tail? I mean, not only is it innovation, but more importantly, and more seriously, this actually does have a purpose in that it can give, when properly positioned, a little bit of more grip to this guy. Out of the box, I get about 2 fingers worth of grip on this guy. I can get a third finger onto the tail there, and that gives me actually a little bit more purchase. Holding this guy with the tail deployed is actually more comfort-inspiring than holding the guy without it. And you can pop the tail out with a single finger, and, you know, so not that this is going to be something people are going to be using all day long at their job down at the dock, so to speak, necessarily, but at the same time, you know what? It's not a bad thing, and it's functionally, it works pretty well, so I appreciate that very much. Next thing, this is nicely finished. I mean, what we see here is a very nice surface finish on this. Looks to be a relatively light blast. You can see we've got these little cutouts with a machine pattern here. We've got some nice anodization, matching pretty roughly throughout all of these various items. We've got very nice grind. We've got sort of a satin flats with a machine grind on the side of this guy. I mean, it does look quite nice. This is done pretty well. For what it is, this looks pretty solid. And I think Spyderco did go the extra mile to make sure it is, if not attractive, but it is a knife that is respectably well done. Spyderco's Taichung factory is great at many things, and fit and finishing is definitely among them. Next thing, this is going to be an exceptionally legal knife. It is a locking knife, which takes it off the table in many places, but if you were to measure the sharpened blade length of this, there is absolutely no way that you could measure this as coming in over 1.5 inches. It's going to be under 4 centimeters. This is going to mean that in a lot of places, including, I believe, Japan, talk to a lawyer, not a YouTuber, but there are going to be super restrictive length laws, and that makes this a possibility in places where, no one else is willing to tread. I mean, heck, even the man bug is coming in at, 1.752 inches here. This is a short blade. So that's going to give you this is going to be an option in a lot of places. And the other thing is it's extremely work-friendly, right? So that's great. Next thing, and final thing on this guy is it has a number of little details that show someone was thinking about it. To start with, just look at the clip. It's got little puppy paw on there. I don't think dogs have that few pads on the feet, but you know what? Hey, I'm not going to get too bent out of shape about that. It's got a nice maker's mark. We can see here the maker's mark of the maker there. I don't know exactly what it says, but I'm assuming it says dude who made the Pochi, or probably his name more accurately. And then the tail. The tail is silly, but at some level, it's actually very well done in that they have included a stop pin, which means that this guy can only go this far on this direction, and it can only go this far on this direction. More importantly, what that means is that while the blade is closed, the tail cannot come in and contact the sharpened edge. There is no way, short of bending the titanium, and by the way, phosphor bronze washers on the tail itself, there is no way for the tail of the knife, that's a weird thing to say, but it's true, to contact the sharpened surface of the blade because of those stop pins. That was a little detail, but it was one I could have easily seen them overlooking, and it's one that I'm very glad to see addressed. So overall, and then, coupled with some of the other nice things, I feel like this is a pretty reasonable little detail piece here. They've gone a little bit further than I might expect to really make this well done. So to me, at least, that's what's good here, is that it's got nice details. It is super legal. Nicely finished. The tail is a nice idea with a thin hollow grind, a massive over-travel stop, and just, it's pretty well done. On the great side to me, this has a very cute design. Let's be real here. It's got a little bit of a doggy style. People have been hounding them for more cute knives lately. And, it's not going to inspire terror and your coworkers with the lunchroom, right? Not everything needs to be like the Canis, some big murdery sort of affair. No, and this guy, let's be real here, it's probably not ever going to be used in a pug anywhere, so it's going to be a pretty safe-looking knife. So, considering that this is light enough to fit in your boxes and has all of the style that you might need here, it would be a real pity if you ignore the nature of this guy. So, anyways, and I think that design is going to be a major asset for it in the future. So, anyways, that's to me the great here is that we have a very nice, cute little design here, rather recalling certain members of the Canada family. All right, back at the ranch on the bad side. Start with, unfortunately, the tail does not wag when it flips. That's a little unrealistic, but that would have been a nice touch. The next thing, this has a very large Spyderco logo. I get it. It's branding. It's important, but it feels like the dog has the dog should probably get that looked at. Let's just be real here. The positioning and size of that kind of take away a little bit from the overall doggy approach here. Would have almost been nice to see that on the backside, to see it someplace else. I'm just not a big fan of that because it definitely takes away some from the from the aesthetic. Next on the bad side, the cutouts on this guy aren't really adding a whole lot. They're okay. They look fine, I guess, but in practice, they're not doing much. And what they are doing is being right under the pocket clip, making this guy more difficult to get into and out of the pocket. And so that's not particularly great, although it is worth noting, by the way, that this hangs very nicely in the pocket. It will naturally end up in a position about like this. It would fit beautifully in a key pocket, the third or fifth pocket on your jeans, etc. So there is that. Next thing, Ergos on this guy, I'm going to be real with you here. They're not amazing, right? It's you can grip it up here. And the other thing is you can do one of these kinds of grips, too. This is something similar you saw in the Spyderco McBee. But honestly, I feel like the McBee was maybe a little bit more designed for ergonomics than this guy was. Yeah, it was the McBee. I'm thinking of the custom there. But this is very clearly designed for the eyes, not for the hands. And although it works, the Ergos aren't great. Next thing, the flipper tab on this guy is not great because if you're trying to cut flat down onto something, what we see here is having this big old flipper tab. It means that the blade is never really going to touch anything on the bottom if you're trying to cut down flat onto something. You've got enough belly here that you can still kind of make it happen. You can still come up like that, but it's not great. Anytime you have a really big disproportionate flipper tab, that becomes a factor. Next thing, this is $190, and look, that's a big old chunk of change, right? That's huge. This must be a freaking designer purebred or something. Look, in practice, it's a CPMS 45VN titanium frame lock with some nice details. I kind of get it, but at the same time, what they're fighting here is the fact that this is going to be a little bit weird, right? This is going to feel a little gimmicky, and so that's a pretty big chunk of change for something whose main raison d'etre, so to speak, sorry, French speaker, is going to be, oh wow, looks like a puppy. And so there's that. And then, yeah, so to me, all of that is the bad, is that it's a pretty big chunk of change here. The flipper tab can definitely block you from cutting onto surfaces. The Ergos aren't amazing. The cutouts really aren't adding too much, and they are directly under the clip, which is not a great thing. The spider on this guy is big, and I'm a little disappointed the tail doesn't wag when it flips. Ugly side. Okay, this thing on the back here. Sure looks like a flipper tab, right? We've been used to flipper tabs on all sorts of knives out there in the world. To show you a flipper tab, this is the Artisan Cutlery Arroyo. In case this is your very first knife review, what you do is you press down and it deploys, right? There's a certain amount of strength that holds the knife shut that is overcome by your finger, and then the blade comes flying out of there. And you can do those in many shapes, in many locations. Here is the Artisan Mini Slim Pickens. Another flipper tab knife. Look, flipper tabs are a thing. On this knife, unfortunately, yeah, not amazing. One more time. I'm going to try and preload this as hard as I can, and no. If you give it some wrist, if you do one of these things, you can absolutely get it open. If you give it some centripetal assistance, it will come flying open out of there. But the problem is that's not ideal in a lot of circumstances, and it, especially with something that's relatively small to grab a hold of, flipping it out like that doesn't feel amazing. Now, this is basically a knife with a bad detent. When I first got it, I thought to myself, oh, that's pretty rough. And then I started asking around, hey, who else got a Pochi? How's your detent? I've heard of one person with a detent that will allow you to flip out this way. I contacted Spyderco. I said, hey, mine's got a really weak detent. Can I send it back? They said, sure. So I mailed them back at my cost, their original review sample. They sent along a second one. Hate to say it, this is the second one. And it is no different than the first one. This leads me to feel like this is not designed to be a flipper tab. This is not designed to be a flipper knife, for that matter. It doesn't particularly work. And at some level, a lot of people are saying, well, Nick, it's not really a flipper. You just use the thumb stud. This is a leg, not a flipper. Like, okay, I guess that's whatever. But it is really frustrating to me because, honestly, this detent strength thing has been a thing over and over again in Spyderco's Taichung factory. Taichung, generally speaking, does some of the best work in Spyderco's lineup. In terms of high-end titanium fit and finish, Taichung is really, really good, but they appear to be the one overseas maker who still can't get a consistent hard detent in 2020, and that's really frustrating to me. So, although the knife is very kind of cute, very interesting, at the end of the day, the detent was kind of a wet blanket, right? And so I think that when it comes to detent and flipping action on this guy, and by the way, this is running on bearings, right? I've tried so very hard to tune this guy up to a level at which it works well, but it just, when it comes to detent, sorry to say, I think they need to get back in the lab. Dog joke. Anyways, so the detent to me is absolutely what's ugly here. That is a very rough situation. The final conclusion-wise, this knife is strange in a bunch of different ways, right? I mean, it has some charms here. It's got a nice over-travel stop, a pretty cutting-edge steel, and a sharp cutting edge anyways. A nice grind, nice finishing, a very legal nature. It's good details, and it's a pretty interesting design, right? For the dog lover in your life, I can see this 100%. In fact, my buddy Sid got one of these guys immediately because he is a major league dog friend. He's a dog enthusiast, and this absolutely matches. And so, you know what? I can see it definitely having that appeal. The Spider is a little bit big. The cutouts are a little bit weird. The Ergos aren't great. It's going to have a little bit of trouble in some cutting tasks, given the Ergos and frankly, the fact that the blade's tiny. It's pretty pricey. The clip is on a sharper area. And unfortunately, if you're thinking about this as being a flipper tab, the detent on this guy is exceptionally poor, requiring a pretty substantial amount of wrist. to get anything roughly done here. And that feeling way behind the times there. Ultimately, my feeling on this guy, there you go, is that this is sort of a novelty, right? This is someplace in between novelty and gimmick. It's nice, and to tend aside, it's actually quite well done. You can tell that they did put in the effort in most of the relevant areas here. But it's not exactly going to knock the PM2 out of your pocket, right? No one's sitting there in the morning thinking to themselves, okay, well, I'm heading out onto the oil rig. I got to make a choice here. Am I carrying the PM2 or the Pochi? PM2 Pochi. PM2, I don't know. No, that is not what's going on here. This is not a high-function tool, and honestly, unlike, Spyderco has a running, I don't know, joke, slogan somewhere in between that, their knives are built for the hand, not for the eye. This is built for the eye. 100%. This is a knife that Spyderco has built entirely for the eye. And you know what? That's okay, right? That's a thing that they're welcome to do. And there are going to be folks who will love it for what that is, right? A cute little pocket tool that is equally cute on the desk. By the way, it does stand up if you're on if I put it on a flat surface here. It does stand up, which is also kind of cute, right? And it's pretty carryable too. This is very easy to throw in your coin pocket, something like that. That can be nice. But to me, at least, the biggest question is the price here. It's a pretty big chunk of change and, frankly, a chunk of manufacturing effort for something whose punchline is basically, oh, puppy. And ultimately, if that's worth the price to you, then okay. And if you don't mind a little bit of risk, so to speak, then no problem, whatever. But otherwise, honestly, I don't see you hounding your local retailers to get one. So anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful, maybe an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now. I hope YouTube uploads this quickly so it can be a good retriever of the video for you. Okay. Bye now.